We found a killer deal with about 30,000 points in business class. I know that's extremely rare and not something that anyone would think that they can replicate. But I'd say if you have at least 50,000 points per person each way for business class, it's possible.
Hey there, points people. You just heard a clip from Amber Paul from Amber on Points. Amber is a former teacher and middle school assistant principal who now teaches her community how to travel on points. In this episode, expect to hear about how to travel with a large family if you have a small budget, hotel versus homestay bookings in Europe, when to prioritize lowering costs versus other priorities like safety or convenience, and so much more. And if you are looking to maximize your points so you can travel like Amber, you can request a free personalized tutorial video for your next points trip at geobreezetravel.com/request. We pick one free tutorial to prepare every week, which you'll find in the free GeoBreeze Travel newsletter. Make sure you open our newsletter every Monday to see if your request was the one that we picked and prepared. And now, on with the show. Hey, Amber, welcome to the GeoBreeze Travel Podcast.
Hey, Julia, thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have you here, and we are going to go over a topic that we very often get questions about, which is how is this possible if you're not just a solo traveler or a couple without kids where both of you are earning credit card points and everything? Because you have a family of 5, so we're going to go over that today.
Yes.
But before we jump into all of that, tell us a little bit about you and your background and how did you get into the world of points and miles?
Yeah, let's do it. My name is Amber Paul. I live in Texas. I've lived in 10 states across the country. And so when you move a lot, I feel like you have a tendency to explore the area around you. But as I said, most recently, we've landed in Texas. When I first graduated from college, I was a teacher. I taught world geography. And I think doing that, I just thought, hey, let's go check out some of these places. And so eventually I got married. And as everyone knows, teachers don't make a ton of money. And my husband was actually quitting his job to go back to school. And so we figured out a couple of ways to creatively save money while traveling. One of those was the Southwest Companion Pass. That was our first thing that we're like, oh, this is a great idea. Let's figure this out. And so gradually, from just the time we were newlyweds on, we have slowly figured out how to travel on points. And then, as often happens, we started having kids. And we realized that we either have to travel less or we have to start figuring out how to do this on a grander scale. And that's what we did. We never stopped traveling, but we did have to figure out how to make it work for our family.
When you are traveling with very small children, how is that different than when you're traveling with, how old are your kids now?
Now they're 4, 7, and 8. So they're grown up.
How is it a little bit different when you're just carrying them around and they're basically a potato versus when they have thoughts and opinions and can run off on their own?
Yes, those potato babies are the best to travel with. Absolutely. You can strap them on and you make all the decisions versus now they're a little bit older. They have opinions. However, I am not one to say that we will not go do any museums. You know, we are not hanging out at playgrounds the whole time. We will explore the playgrounds, but we are very much still exploring the things that we want to explore because kids are a part of our family and we all have priorities and we all make it work together. And so, yes, while it is easier to travel while they're strapped on, it's also really nice to not carry around a sack of potatoes all the time. It's nice once they can start walking and start making decisions. And so travel is different. And I think it's all about flexibility and knowing that if you want to travel with your family, then there are some sacrifices that have to be made.
How are the points and miles logistics different when you're traveling with an infant versus an elementary school child?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when we're traveling with an infant, I perfectly am well aware that you can buy your child a seat and have a more enjoyable ride for yourself, right? Like all about that. However, knowing that I need to conserve my points to fly 5 of us, you know, even when one was a baby, maybe, I haven't had that luxury. I haven't had the luxury of just thinking, oh yeah, I've got so many points, I'm going to get my kid a seat. Realistically, yeah, they're sitting on your laps, they're squirming all around, they are touching things and you're trying not to have a meltdown. But I mean, opportunity costs, right? Like the trip is well worth having a miserable flight potentially. And so that's what we've done. We've just realized we're going to have 8 hard hours or 4 hard hours or 2 hard hours. And eventually the end is going to be so much better than if we stayed home because do you know what? Kids are hard at home too.
What are some of the best airlines for flying with infants versus flying with elementary school children on points?
We definitely use those Southwest Companion Passes. Is it ideal for kids not having, you know, the seat back entertainment? No, it's so nice when that is there instead of having to unpack the iPads and pairing all the Bluetooth speakers and doing all the things. But you really can't beat having that Southwest companion pass for domestic or, Central American travel. And so that's something that we've really utilized with that. Internationally, to be totally honest with you, those COVID years occurred when my kids were 2 to 4-ish, maybe even a little bit younger. And so we did not fly a ton internationally during those baby years. Toddler years, yes, but we didn't need to use the bassinets. We didn't need to do that sort of thing. But we definitely have benefited from the Air France 25% off kids when you're booking on points. That's something that's been huge for us and really kind of pulled us back to Air France time and time again.
Yeah, another fan favorite is Air Canada, where lap infants are only 25 Canadian dollars. So even if you're flying business class, a lot of airlines will charge you 10% the revenue price of the ticket, which you're getting a high cents per point. That can be a lot of money. 25 Canadian, that's a fantastic deal. If you're okay with lap infants, you're good to go there.
You're good to go. Yep. Yeah. So that's not something that we've had to do a ton of, paying extra for a lap infant, because we haven't done business class and international when the kids were that young, but it's nice to know that it's an option for sure.
Yeah. Do most domestic airlines charge a lot for lap infants as well? Like if you're flying American or United or Alaska or something like that?
It's usually zero. It's usually just bring the birth certificate and show up at the gate with a human and they'll let you take them on. So it's typically a non-issue.
What are some strategies for parents who are like, how do you earn enough points to fly a family of 5 at least once a year on an overseas vacation without opening just 25 credit cards?
Right. It's a good question. And unfortunately, lots of the answers are opening up the credit cards with great welcome offers. However, we've been doing this for 12 years and we have made this a point of our lifestyle. And so we do everything in our power to, in a conservative way, I mean, if opening up 3 or 4 credit cards each is conservative, to really figure out when we need the points and how to earn those points to maintain really good relationships with everyone involved. And so I would say one thing that we've had to really figure out is how to earn points that actually have enough points, obviously, for all 5 of us. And so many times you hear people saying earn and burn, inflation occurs for points as well. And unfortunately, with larger family travel, that's just not possible. You do have to save up those points. Otherwise, you'll never have enough points to travel, right? And so obviously we use shopping portals, we use Rakuten, we use all of the things to continually be earning points outside of just continually open up credit cards. And then sometimes you just realize that for family travel, you might not be getting as much value for your points. We have flown business class to Europe, but I don't expect to fly business class to Europe all the time. I realize if I can get a killer deal business class, yes. But am I looking for business class flights for my family? No, I'm not. And I should say, even when we travel, if I travel solo or just with my husband, oftentimes we aren't flying business class too, just because we need to conserve those points for our family's upcoming trip. And so, like I said, there's give and take. There's sometimes where the bougie travel is possible and sometimes where we just realize that's not on the cards for now, but we've had those days and they'll come back again, maybe.
For a family of 5, how often are you taking a flight over the ocean? And for somebody who's new to the game, how many points would you recommend that they budget for this if they want to do it in economy or business class?
Good question. So we have taken our kids to Europe the last 2 years. We've also taken our kids to Costa Rica. We've got flights for Hawaii booked. But I know that Europe is often the hot topic. And so we have consistently been able to find flights for about 20,000 points each way. And so for a family of 5, granted, you can find discounts through certain airlines for points, but I'd still say bare minimum, before you start looking, maybe have 100,000 points for each way. I know that with Virgin and with airlines, you can for sure find these killer deals. But I would also say that once you do have kids that are a little bit older, unless you're homeschooling and unless you own your own company, I mean, it's very rare that we can take a trip with our kids on the fly that also works with my husband's schedule and my schedule. And so realistically, we need to have a good stash of points booked. It's not that we're just seeing those 10,000 point deals roll in and we're like, oh, let's drop everything and go, for obvious reasons. And so I would say have at least 100,000 points each way if you're expecting to fly economy, and at least 200,000 points each way if you're planning on flying business. And that's, as we all know, with like a killer business class deal for 5 people.
That would be 200,000 for all 5. So
Correct.
That's like 40,000 round trip.
Yep. That's what
Oh.
we've been able to find. So we've been able to find 20,000 points each way in terms of adults, the 40,000 round trip. And then for kids, when we do fly Air France, they do get that 25% points back. And so yes, kids round trip flights, we found successfully for about 30,000 points the last few years.
And just to confirm, that 200,000 budget, is that for business or economy?
200,000 total. We've been able to do this for 175,000 points round trip the last 2 years, economy, for 5 of us.
How much would you budget for a family of 5 wanting to do a business class flight to Europe?
It's so hard because you see all these flash deals, and it's possible. We did fly our family of 5 this last year, business class, only there. I realized that, do you know what? On the way back, I want my kids to be awake anyway. And so I didn't need to lay flat seats on the way back. But we found a killer deal. It's about 30,000 points in business class. I know that's extremely rare and not something that anyone would think that they can replicate. But I'd say if you have at least 50,000 points per person each way for business class, it's possible. It's difficult potentially, but it's possible. You know, you might not be on Q suites, but you'll be business class, lay flat, potentially, if you're finding a good deal.
I like to tell people 10K rule. So for every hour that you're going to be
Yes.
flying, 10,000 points per hour in lay flat business class. So if it's 8 hours from Chicago to Germany or something, budget 80,000 points per person each way.
Absolutely.
You will likely find deals that are better than that, but you'll have enough points if you do the 10K rule for business class, 5K rule for economy. So it kind of depends how far you're flying and whether you're going to Europe.
Yeah.
A lot of people find better deals than those. But also a great way to find good points deals is if you're willing to do positioning flights. Can you talk a little bit about that strategy when you have 3 children in tow? Do you guys do positioning flights, or you're like, we got to just fly from our home airport because it's a lot to coordinate?
Oh, we've done all sorts of creativity. Yeah, we actually did a positioning flight this year for our trip to Europe. We live in Austin, or in the Austin area, but we found these awesome business class flight deals from Chicago. And so you're right, it is difficult. It's not something that is easy. It's not necessarily enjoyable. I'll say that too. I was a little bit paranoid about potentially getting in the morning of the flight. And then, you know, what if a flight is delayed, and our flight to Europe was at 4 p.m. And so we ended up flying into Chicago the night before, and we made a day out of it. We got a hotel at a Hyatt downtown. We went on the river cruise, and we ate the deep dish pizza, and we did all the things. And then that morning we packed up again and took all of our stuff and went all the way back to the airport and flew out. Now, could we have done it easier? Absolutely. We could have stayed at an airport hotel. It would have been nothing. I mean, not nothing, but like it's still anywhere you travel is a big deal with kids. But we kicked it up a notch, and we're like, oh, we're going to make this an adventure. We're going to go see Chicago. And so I would say the downside wasn't even in getting extra flights, because we just flew Southwest there with 2 companion passes. We stayed at a Hyatt for point. So we positioned from Chicago, and we live in Austin. And so what we ended up doing the night before, instead of risking it and flying in that morning, we ended up flying from Austin to Chicago. And instead of just staying at an airport hotel, kind of on the outskirts of the city, we went in and we got a Hyatt. It was $0. We used some points, and we did the whole boat tours, and we ate the deep dish pizza, and we had this really great experience. And to be honest, it was awesome. It was really fantastic. The difficult thing was it extended our travel day. So as you know, flying to Europe, you're already traveling for a solid day, basically. And so this just made it so it was a full 2-day travel. And then to make matters even worse, for some reason, when I was booking my flight, so we flew from Chicago to Madrid, and then we had a layover, and then we were going to continue on to Vienna. And when I was booking my flight, I could book the easy layover, 2 hours, or I could book an 8-hour layover and let my kids check off one more country. And so I'm like, yeah, we'll do that. We'll go explore one more country, paid for storage, and our other bags were still checked. And we went out and we explored Madrid. And so it is such a balance, whether you're looking at a positioning flight or a long layover or a stopover, all the things. It is just such a balance of not even can your kids handle it, because I truly believe that kids can do hard things. Can the parents handle it? Are they interested in trying it? Do they care? Because kids, like I said, they can do hard things, but the thing is, do the adults want to do hard things? And that's how we did it. Will I do it that way again next time? I don't know. But my kids can say they went to Spain. And so here we are.
Was that the 30,000 point business class trip? Was Chicago through Spain through Vienna?
It was, yep.
Was that Iberia, or what was that?
It was Iberia. Yeah.
30,000 points with the connection. So that's really, really good.
Yeah, it was really awesome. And then, as you know, so the connection, you can choose to continue flying business class, but I actually just dropped it down to economy, because I know those little puddle jumper planes, they don't have lay flat business. And, it was just a 2-hour flight anyway. So I ended up on the second leg just decreasing it to economy. And that saved, for one person, it wouldn't have been a big deal. It might have been 6,000 points. But for a family, multiplying that by 5, that saved us a lot of points just changing over from business to economy for that short little leg.
Another great family deal is with Virgin Atlantic. You can oftentimes get business class flights for about $30,000. I thought that's what you were going to say, was like you positioned over to Florida and then flew to England or something,
Oh,
because
yeah.
that's a very common one too.
Oh, yeah. And I need to look at next summer, so maybe I'll check that one out.
Or economy starts at 6,000.
I
per
know.
person.
And you can truly earn 6,000 points per person without opening a ton of credit cards. You really can. And so anyone that's saying that this is on the table for them because they don't want to open up a ton of cards, there are ways to make it happen. If there's a will, there's a way, for sure.
Yeah, a couple of them. If you open up a Basque bank account and that's just your savings account, you get passive income American Airlines miles that way. With Rove, if you're booking your hotels through there, you can earn like 50 or 60 miles per dollar, and they're flexible. So you can move those Rove miles to Air France, Avios, Cathay Pacific, wherever you want to go. So that's just 2 ways to do this without credit cards, which have tens of thousands of points, not like,
Right.
oh, I clicked through a shopping portal and I
Yeah.
got 5 points.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's huge, especially for people where this all just seems so foreign, just to know that they can do these small steps to make it happen. It's a big deal.
So speaking of when we were talking about Rove and you can book hotels through there, earn a lot of points, what are some tips that you have for large families on a budget for saving on hotels and accommodations, especially in Europe where they take those fire codes seriously?
So frustrating because you will literally try to book the hotel online and they will say, no, max amount of 2 people per room or 3 people per room. And then you get there and you're talking in person to the front desk sometimes. And they're like, oh, yeah, we can throw in a rollaway. And you're like, why didn't you say this when I called? And so the problem with all of this is that you can never depend on it. You have to follow those fire codes, and obviously you have to do whatever you say in writing. And so basically, this is how I do it. If we're traveling abroad, I will always reach out to the hotel that I'm interested in staying at first, and I will email them so that it's in writing. Can you handle 3 people per room or 5 people per room if it's a suite? If they say yes and it's in writing, obviously I'm going to run with that. If they do not, then you have to book your 2 rooms. I even had to book 3 rooms once this summer. And so we will do that to some extent. And I think last summer, or I guess 2 summers now ago at this point, we booked like the Hyatt Regency Amsterdam, which was beautiful and fantastic. And we had Globalist Guest of Honor certificate. And so we were able to eat the free breakfast on site and enjoy the lounge. And it was awesome. However, I burned like 120,000 points in 3 nights. And I understand some people value luxury travel, and I do. I love luxury travel, but I don't want to spend a ton of points on 2 hotel rooms when sometimes my kids are going to they want to be in my room squished by me anyway. And so it's really frustrating to have to book multiple hotel rooms. And so we do that for sure. But this last summer, we went to Budapest, we went to Prague, and we went to Vienna. And the Lindner Hotel brand, which is owned by Hyatt, has a pretty great footprint in that area. And we were able to get hotel rooms we booked it back before a category increase, but you could currently get some of those hotel rooms for like 8,000 points a night, which is a steal. That is a steal of a deal. And so we were able to do that for 2 of our different spots. And then to complicate things even more, this summer we tried out something called home exchange. And so home exchange is kind of what it sounds like. It's just like the movie Holiday. I'm sure you know all about it, but it can happen where you are doing a reciprocal change where you're going to someone's house and someone's going to your house, just like in the Holiday, but no one wants to come to Austin, Texas in July. Like absolutely no one. I would not tell anyone to come to Austin in July. And that's when we were traveling. And so they also have something you can do that is basically a non-reciprocal exchange where you let someone come to your house and, basically you just get points when people stay at your house. And then you can take those points and you can turn around and you can utilize those points to book other people's homes. And so, of course, you can do this. The people whose homes we stayed in, they welcomed us and showed us where things are and showed us how to use the things. And then they disappeared and stayed with family or went on their own trip. It was really nice. It just felt nice. They left suggestions of where we should eat and stuff. And that was really cool. And so we have done home exchange to make things really weird. We've actually Airbnb'd our personal house where we have had people pay us to stay in our house. We haven't done that in a while. So anything to make it happen, right? And then we have also definitely paid for Airbnbs. No question. Sometimes when you're traveling with more than 2 to 4 people, Airbnbs will just get you just as much value as staying in a hotel or probably more.
What are some of your tips for saving on excursions or food or everything that's not covered by flights and hotels where it's not something that you can just cash out points or redeem points or transfer points for?
Yeah, it's a great question. In terms of souvenirs, we tell our kids to bring their own money or we let them pick out one thing for the whole trip. So we were just in Europe for 3 weeks. In terms of souvenirs, we go very light. We buy a Christmas ornament for the family, we buy a piece of art, and then our kids can pick out maybe one thing, literally like once a year. We'll probably go on like 7 or 8 trips, and then maybe on one trip we'll say yes to like a small souvenir. In terms of food, we eat food at home, and so we just take that into account. The week or two before we travel, we're going to try to eat out of our fridge and freezer and save money there, and we're going to spend that money when we're on the road, wherever that might be. And so to be honest with you, we aren't watching that super closely. Now I will say, in terms of museums, zoos, stuff like that, we budget for it. We actually have a high yield savings account, and I just keep in mind that any of that interest that we earn throughout the year, that is what we bookmark for our travel money, and it just makes it feel a little bit better. But all in all, we just try to make smart choices. And so we're not going to Broadway shows every night. We're not doing all of the museums when we are with kids. When we're traveling just with the two of us, sure, we'll hit multiple museums and all those things together, but we usually choose maybe 2 activities a day that are like paid for activities, and other things are not. However, I will say in Europe, especially with younger kids, I would say probably 10 and under, odds are in lots of the museums, on lots of the trains, lots of it is free for young kids. Of course, once they're teenagers, this isn't going to save us anymore, but we for sure benefit. There's like family plans you can buy when you go to the zoos or to the museums, and that kind of just gives us a free kid or two basically in lots of those places. So we're not necessarily wiping with Capital One points, like all of our train tickets and stuff. We're just traveling in a way that's sustainable. And so we just spent 3 weeks in Europe, and we spent less than $3,000, including taxes and fees for business class flights. That's not horrible. We would have paid for gas and food back home. And so most people don't travel for 3 weeks, so they can probably do it even cheaper.
What's your favorite budgeting app? Because you mentioned you budget for all of this.
We do. We loved Mint. We loved it. It was free. It was good. It synced with all the places. Well, unfortunately, it's gone now. And so we have recently transitioned over to Monarch. Have you heard of that?
I have. I'm looking into it because I've heard such good things. Tell us about it.
Yeah, Monarch is really awesome. You can log on with all of your different bank accounts, and we have a million of them, and it syncs everything. We even have hooked up our mortgage company so we can see how much money we have left on our house to pay. We've synced up like our 401ks from various jobs that we both had. So it's really nice. It just keeps everything in the same place for you. And then my husband just has a habit of in the morning when he's on his phone before he gets up the urge to move out of bed for the day, he'll just go in and make sure that things are categorizing appropriately. So say we have 10 cards open, they're all funneling into Monarch so we can see those transitions, and he just sorts them so we can keep track of all the expenses there.
Something that a lot of families take into account when they're like, okay, we've got a lot of us traveling, but we have to stick to a budget. But also, when you are going for the cheapest option, sometimes that compromises certain things like,
Yeah.
it's safe to be in this area because we could save a lot of money, but isn't a good part of town. What is your advice for kind of weighing all of those things of like, how cheap do we go versus there's other things like safety or just proximity and convenience to take into account? How do you balance all that?
I think all in all, we try to choose hotels or Airbnbs, obviously in the good part of town. We don't completely sacrifice finding the cheapest Airbnb, for sure. Especially my husband often works remotely when we travel, and so we need internet, we need space. And so that's definitely something that we take into consideration. I also think it's important to know that sometimes we just don't have the extra funds and we just don't travel big during that time. I actually had a follower comment the other day, why don't you ever travel in the US? And in my head, I was thinking, well, I've already lived in 10 states and then I've seen the surrounding areas. And so there's not that much to see. And then I was reflecting on that and I was like, what are you talking about? America has so many different places that I could still go see. And so I know that so many times we are following content creators who are going on these big bougie trips. And I think it's important for us to know that just driving out an hour west sometimes is good enough. And your kids are going to have great experiences wherever you are. It doesn't have to be in a foreign country. It doesn't have to be in Europe. And so, yeah, of course, we want to keep safety in mind. We aren't going to specific countries right now. And there are times when this summer we woke up and we're like, ugh, I don't know if we should be here right now. And I just think it's important to keep in mind, if you don't feel safe, then, I mean, you got to make the right choices for your family. And being a parent comes with that responsibility that you have to make those choices. And I would definitely say we don't compromise in terms of like picking the cheapest things. We just cut back in other areas, unfortunately. But also, like long term, I don't think we'll ever have any regrets from maybe missing a museum versus staying in a place where we felt comfortable.
How about balancing budgets with convenience? Because I know you talked about you took the longer layover, but that was more to scratch off another country. If a family is like, okay, we could save a whole bunch of points or a whole bunch of money, it's going to be a bit suckier
Yeah.
of an itinerary, or okay, this hotel is cheaper, but it's not as close to the train station. So we're going to have to walk like another 10 minutes each time we go to and from the hotel. Just little things like that where you're like, okay, everything's completely safe. It's just slightly less convenient. What's kind of the heuristic for what's your inconvenience threshold that you're willing to pay for?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of flights, I prefer one layover, period. And that's something that I'd probably pay a little bit more for. Now, granted, if you throw in a positioning flight, that complicates things right there. But so many, I'm sure, Julia, you've used flight connections, and literally there are only 4 flights. And I'm talking about flightconnections.com if anyone doesn't know what that is. But there are literally only 4 international flights, I should say, to Europe out of Austin. And so it is no way possible to get a nonstop flight from Austin to Budapest. Like, it's not even an option. And so I think bringing down expectations, no matter what that is one of the keys to all this, is knowing that travel with family might not be easy, period. It just might not. Now, in terms of like adding on an extra 10-minute walk to be to the perfect part of the city, I would probably choose that over having a more complicated, longer, horrible flight itinerary. But that's just me, because I know that I can, in the nicest way possible, manipulate my children to walk farther with treats. And so there are things that you can do. And it's just hard because it's harder for us parents lots of times. We have to be creative. We have to think of games we can play or things we can distract them with as we're walking a little bit farther, or as it's an unfortunate layover. And so I don't know what's better or what's worse, but I'm typically fine to walk a little bit further and still have the experience as long as it's safe. But I would probably prefer an easier flight route.
That brought up another good point of when there's a larger family, there's more people weighing in with different opinions, especially as they become teenagers, or even if this isn't a family trip, if you're coordinating a group trip with 4 adults.
Totally.
How do you coordinate different preferences and opinions? And okay, here's the flight schedule versus here's the hotel versus something else.
Yeah, great question. We have traveled with other couples recently, and sometimes it's nice to sit back and be a passenger princess and be like, yeah, you guys take this one. I've planned a million other trips this year. But what we typically do is we divide it up city by city. So if there's multiple stops, me and my husband will take one of the stops, and then the other couple will take the next one, and vice versa. And you just know you're kind of along for the ride, and you had your say, and you hopefully pick the city that you're most passionate about. In terms of kids, I remember back when I was teaching 9th grade geography, I remember that one of my lesson plans was, I want you to plan a trip. I want to know how much it's going to cost. I want to know where you're going to stay. I want to know your itinerary items. And I just think, how real world is that? And so I look forward to that day when my kids are a little bit older and where I can just say, okay, here's a computer. I want you to look up all of the things to do in this area and list your top 3. And how cool and how much more buy-in would kids or teenagers have if they had an opportunity to choose some of those things? And so, yeah, you might have a kid that's like, I'm not going to this museum. And you might have another one that's like, no, I want gelato right now. But ultimately, if you are planning an itinerary where everyone has a day or everyone has an ability to have some sort of say-so, I think that's so valuable. However, I don't think it's valuable the day of, in the nicest way possible. Like, the trip with kids needs to be planned as much as possible beforehand. Because when you wake up that morning, everyone's tired and they don't want to make decisions, and there's arguing and you've got other things going on. And so I'm not saying you shouldn't be flexible, because you totally should, but I would recommend to have a general idea of what you're doing before you get there, so that the whole morning isn't just bickering and you already know what you're in for.
Whenever I'm traveling, my husband and I like to go in with 3 hours per day planned for each day. So we'll usually say, oh, here's like the excursion of the day. 3
Yeah.
hours are planned. And then the rest of the time we'll just wander around that area because there's probably other cool things to do
Yeah.
within the vicinity.
Right. And that's one of my favorite things to do is just walk around a city, especially at night, and just like take it all in and see what the people are doing. And that's one thing that I do kind of give up a little bit with kids because come 8 o'clock at night, I do not want to be anywhere with my children. I want them to be asleep and I'm just done. But I do love just walking around and just seeing the place. And I think that's so valuable is just to have time where you can just explore and do whatever, go wherever the wind takes you. And so I love that idea.
Perfect. Well, Amber, as we wrap up here, any other last tips for larger families on a budget who are still looking to travel, especially with points and miles?
Yeah, I think it's just bigger picture. I think just know that you can do it. You can travel with points and miles. You don't have to open up a million credit cards, but you do need to have this mentality that you can do hard things and you can make it happen. I really believe if you want to make it happen, that you absolutely will. And then just the whole idea of being flexible and being creative. Just being a parent is all about being creative and figuring out, do you need to fly out of another airport? Do you need to stay in a certain place? And I will say the most difficult thing for us, or I should say, the way to make your trip easier is to have less transitions. And so if this is your first trip with a larger family, maybe just have like 2 transitions and just see how it goes. And you can take day trips, but don't move all your crap. But I think the more transitions you have, the more difficult it can be. And so just keep that in mind.
Great tip. I would also add, you don't need to focus on cents per point with everything else going
No,
on.
that is not even on my radar. You're totally right.
So many people on the internet are like, I got 15 cents per point. If you are juggling multiple children and a
No.
budget, that doesn't seem to be where your head's at.
I don't even know if I've ever calculated cents per point.
Yep. Well, if anyone has any questions for you, where can people find you?
Yes, I would love to answer any questions. You can find me at Amber on Points on Instagram or at amberonpoints.com.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Amber, for joining us on the show today. I'm sure so many people are going to find this episode super useful.
Awesome. Well, thank you.